can we take strong action but born out of love and not hatred? Is our quandary and hopefully our exploration.
This is Synchronicity.
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 Welcome to episode 100 of Synchronicity. My guest this week is Sharon Salzberg, the return of Sharon. She's been here before on Synchronicity. I'm thrilled to have her as my 100th guest. I guess she's technically not my 100th guest because we've had repeats, but my 100th episode guest. I don't have anything special planned for the 100th episode. I wanted to do a clip show, which I think would be really cool. And if there is a volunteer who wants to put that together, who's a listener, be my guest, and I will put it out there and give you credit and point people in your direction, because that'd be really helpful and cool, I think. But I don't have anything planned because I have not had the time for it. But I encourage you, if you're a new listener, to go check out some of the other episodes because there's some stuff here and people are enjoying it, and I enjoy doing it. So I haven't missed a week, so we're 104. When we get to episode 104, that'll have been 2 solid years of doing this, and that should happen in October, if my math is correct. So yeah, just a big thank you to everyone who has sustained this podcast. And truthfully, I've said this before, I'd like to be one of those people who would think that I would do this if no one was listening, but I don't know that I am. My music, some of my other artistic things, I would do those even if no one's listening, because trust me, oftentimes they're not. But this, I like that there's a community and feedback, and it's not just me talking to myself. It is talking to you, and having you care about it is cool to me. So I'm really thrilled that you're doing that, and you're a listener. That's awesome. It means a lot to me. I'm also really happy that Sharon is my guest today. We talk about love, which is one of my favorite subjects. I remember back in 2004 or 3 or so, I did a heavy dose of LSD. I don't know how much, to be honest. Who knows these days? Who's really testing it out unless you got a really good hookup? Good for you. And I had a lot of things happen, but I remember afterwards, all I could talk about was unconditional love. I wouldn't shut up about unconditional love, and to the point where it's like essentially alienating friends and strangers alike, because it's like, who wants to hear about that all of the time? To me, it meant something, and there was more than just the words that were coming out, which led me to the conclusion that words are not always the best tools to communicate things, whether they're emotions or experiences. That's a conversation for another time. But anyway, I just had this huge, profound sense of unconditional love. And it wasn't emotional. It wasn't like this, Sharon describes this, being swept away in this euphoric bliss. It was a real, it's almost an ineffable, hard thing to say, but I define it as unconditional love. It's also one of and so that always left an imprint on me. So I always think about love, at least in that context. But love is a really tricky word. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and can mean different things to the same person. Like I said, there's romantic love. There can be the love of something. There can be intellectual love. There can be spiritual love. There can be loving someone who's being a dick to you because they're providing an opportunity for you to grow. And that doesn't mean, I love you, thank you so much for being, I really love that you fucked me over, that's the best. No, but you can have love extend to them for maybe making you realize something about yourself. So it doesn't have to be that you're just like going and helping them and want to offer them things and like you would to like maybe a partner you're in a romantic relationship with. So there's this whole spectrum of love, and it's complicated and it's stigmatized, and you don't have to look very far to realize that. So when someone like Sharon, who's been an active meditation teacher and meditator for decades, turns her gaze on a topic like love, I think it's worthwhile paying attention. And I'm just love that I got to have a conversation with her. No pun intended. She talks about a lot of different things. We talk about a lot of different things in this, including doubt, the varieties of of love that people can encounter. There's real love, which her book is called. I don't want to forget about that. Sharon has a new book, came out a couple months ago. It's called Real Love. 100% pick it up. It's not even a question. I'll have links on this podcast page to this episode and on the actual podcast, wherever you're listening. So please go get that. Sharon deserves our financial support in this way because the book is really fantastic. And I think after this episode, you'll hear why she's so great. So I don't want to give the whole episode away. I know I do that every single beginning time. I do want to talk about this event, September 21st in New York City at Neue House. There's going to be amazing people there. I just want to talk about people I know you know if you've been listening to this podcast. So if you want to get a sense of the vibe of this thing, here's who's going to be there. Jennifer Sodini, Ruby Warrington, Diego Young Pueblo, Sarah Potter, John F. Simon Jr. We're going to have Yoshino from the Artist Decoded podcast, Kelly McLean from the Tao of Comedy podcast, and Michael Phillip from Third Eye Drops. That's just the people you can check out on this podcast and their respective channels to see what's going on there. There's also going to be, I think, 14 other people. You can check out the entire lineup and details at Witma, WITMA live.com. And I want to talk a little bit about the prices of the tickets. I haven't gotten any feedback on it, but I know what I would think if I saw a ticket price, and it's $85. Just let's get that out of the way. If I saw a ticket price like $85, I don't know that I would be like, yeah, I'm definitely doing this right away. I've gone to music events that are that much, comedy shows, and I'm usually generally happy with that. Let me try to explain as clearly as I can why we priced it at this. We're doing it at a really nice venue called Neue House. They're not really making any money on this either. They're providing operational staff, some AV support so we can record it and get it out afterwards so people who aren't there can see it. We're going to facilitate the live streams that we're going to be doing. So when all is said and done, it's costing a decent chunk of change to get this event off the ground. We're also obviously have partnered with 3 people here. We're busting our asses working on this. And this isn't really a plea. It's just kind of, I want people to know that this isn't some like, hey, let's get rich off an event. So I understand that the ticket price may be high for some people. And again, I haven't had any feedback from this. And I know we're pitching this right now, at least before Labor Day, and people may be at Burning Man and all of these other things are going on. But I am offering for people who want a little bit of a discount, a code. If you use the code MPN, so M is in Mary, P is in Paul, N is in Noah, you get $10 off the ticket price. Also, if you're listening to this podcast and this is not going out, this is not a promotional thing for everyone. If you want to come to this event and you're in New York City, but you can't afford it, send me an email at noah@syncpodcast.com and we'll work something out because I want people who are there physically who want to go to this to be able to come. Finally, you may have heard me talk about it before, the Creative Evolution, the course I developed to help you access and maintain a creative practice. I'm going to offer that for anyone who goes to this event in New York City who has been interested in that. I will give that to you for free, the email version. I got a lot of great feedback from people recently who still are finding it on older episodes. So I'm going to throw that into. I basically want to make this worth your while in as many ways as I can because I know it's going to be a really cool event. I have no doubts about that whatsoever. And if you're a listener of the show and it sounds interesting and you like any of the people I mentioned or any people you see, I want you to be able to come. So I'm not going to beat you over the head with this every single week. I'll mention it running up to the event, but I would love to see you. And I'll also have details on the live stream, how you can watch all of this stuff if you can't make it there, because it'd be kind of not cool if we just are like, you're not going to be able to see it because you don't live in New York. Not cool. So that's all I got this week in the intro. I appreciate you listening. Sharon is amazing. Please enjoy this episode. Without further ado, here is Sharon Salzberg. Cool. Well, yeah, no, I really appreciate you doing this one too. This is actually, it's going to be my 100th episode, which is hard to believe, but
Oh, that's fabulous.
yeah, I'm
I
pretty
like doing
excited.
other people's podcasts. That I like.
It's super fun, right? I know.
Yeah.
I just did one the other day. It's a lot more relaxing.
It is a lot more relaxing.
Although I will say this is a relaxing one for me too, so I'm not particularly stressed out. Cool. We'll just get started. I mean, I if there's anything specifically you want to cover, obviously we'll get into the book and
Yeah.
love and all of those things. But outside of that, I have a few directions. I want to talk a little bit about Goenka and some other things. And yeah, but are you ready to get started?
Sure. Just remind me of how long this is.
Oh, it'll probably be 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay,
Thereabouts,
great.
no
Okay.
longer. Yeah. Cool. All right. So I've obviously I'm familiar with you for a whole host of reasons, but I was doing just like I heard on Sean's podcast that this was your 10th book. And I think I knew that before that. So I was like, all right, let me go look at all of the titles of your books and see what kind of, like, I know what the emerging themes are, but then I remembered that like you pick these themes and these words that have these tremendous amount of stigma attached to them. Right. And I love that because I think if we can get to the core of what those words inherently mean or mean to different people, we can kind of destigmatize them, which I imagine is the goal when you're writing things like faith, happiness, and love. So I was wondering if we could just start there. Like, what is it that compels you to kind of pick these topics that seem to have these stigmas attached to them, but really do have something powerful to communicate underneath, nevertheless?
Well, I'm not even sure I do that consciously. It's like at some point I did the same thing. I looked at different titles and I saw the pattern. I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? Like I knew with faith that I was doing that,
right?
Because even my friends would say, what in the world are you writing about that for? Or, you better call it something else, which commercially might have been a better idea. But my whole thing was I wanted to redeem the word. I wanted to take it out of the realm of being silenced and not being able to ask questions and having to give up self-respect to just take on the vision of truth of another and, all the things the word had come to mean to people.
Right.
And bring it back to what more my experience of a living kind of faith was. And so I just thought, oh yeah, let's try.
Well, just to jump in with faith here, what is your living experience with faith? Because this is a word I find myself trying to explain or the experience quite often in different ways. Sometimes I feel like I'm effective. Sometimes I'm like, nope, did not convey what I meant to say there. So like, what's your lived experience of the word faith?
Well, I in part I used a very Buddhist perspective, and in part it was a major part it was very, very personal, and that is it's in the Buddhist teaching it's offering your heart, it's giving over your heart to something, and so it's an activity, and it's a little bit like stepping off the sidelines into trying to actualize a possibility. It's like people often ask me, what brought you to India at the age of 18? I was a college student and I'd done one course in Asian philosophy. I heard about the Buddha. I heard about meditation. And, then I was in India. I had never even been to California when I went to India. And, people say, what was that moment? And I think, part of my writing the book, Faith, was the exploration of that moment. Because I could have stayed, I was going to school in Buffalo, New York. Could have stayed in Buffalo, finished up, gotten a graduate degree in Asian studies or something like that, or if I was that interested, or some other academic pursuit, and never having gone. But there was something in me that said, what could this mean for you?
Right.
And that's a good thing, like wanting to actualize, wanting to be in the center of possibility, instead of just marginalized and on the side. So offering your heart, getting into that kind of activity. What's very special and wonderful about the Buddhist perspective is that doubt is not an enemy of faith. Doubt is really an ally of faith. Questioning, wondering, insisting on seeing for yourself. All those things are considered very positive. They're not problematic. So
Is that
Some Go ahead.
is that in so in the grand sense, I think I totally get that concept.
Uh-huh.
Experientially too, like, this, the famous Ram Dass stuff, suffering is the sandpaper of our incarnation. It actually
Uh-huh.
shapes us to accommodate the changing circumstances and the inevitabilities of life in a certain
Uh-huh.
way. That said, when I'm actually going through it, sometimes doubt does feel like a direct enemy of my experience. So it's how to maintain that perspective
Mm-hmm.
in the face of things where at least seemingly at the temporal experience, things are not going well, right? There's something objectively, external circumstances are not purposely conspiring against you or people but stuff is not going great. What are some ways that we maintain that kind of active clarity or wisdom about the function of doubt and being an ally of faith? Because that's awesome. And I don't really know. I've probably heard it before. I don't think I've really heard it. If you get that, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, there are different kinds of doubt. There's the kind of doubt that has some belief in one's own capacity to at least eventually understand and have some inner strengths and so on. And then there's the kind of doubt that they call it speculative doubt, which is more just being stuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's like not being able to take the next step because you feel like you need to know what's going to happen 50 steps down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And that just leaves us stuck because you can't know. And so um, the almost the best example, I use this in the book Faith actually, I got of that sense of doubt that's sort of useless was we maybe in this day and age we'd call it cynicism.
Mm.
It's like not being willing to try something out for oneself, but just standing on the sidelines and kind of putting it down or,
Yeah.
being scornful of it. And so the example is from, they say the Buddha, as I'm sure you know, got enlightened sitting under a tree.
Mm.
And he spent 49 days just in the vicinity of the tree, doing different, did walking meditation for 7 days. He happily contemplated something for 7 days. And very sweetly, he gazed at the tree in gratitude for having sheltered him on his night of practice for 7 days. So at the end of 7 times 7, the end of 49 days, he got up and he decided to walk to a nearby town in order to meet up with these old friends of his in order to, deliver his first lecture and his first sermon. And the first person he came upon as he was walking was this man. So this is just like 49 days after the Buddha's enlightenment. He was like really radiant, and and this man was struck by his radiance and said, "Who are you? Like, what are you? Are you a human being? Are you some kind of celestial being? Who are you?" And the Buddha said, "I'm awake." And the man said, "Yeah, maybe," and he walked away. So that's an example of what I call walk away doubt. It's not that useful. Like he could have, that's an outrageous thing to say, "I'm awake." There's no reason for him to believe that.
Right.
But what if he'd stuck around and said, "What do you mean
Right.
you're awake? And can anybody get awake? Can I get awake? Is there a
Right.
path? Will my awake look like you're awake?" Like he could have asked anything and that would have been useful.
Right. It's like this
But
open-mindedness and receptivity to something.
right.
I
right.
see.
But just walking away was useless because,
You're missing it. You're
missing it.
You're closing yourself off from. This is that approach, whether nefarious or not, and typically not, really does lead to a lot of the kind of rigidity and closed-mindedness that creates a lot of these sticky situations for everyone, not just, and that's how to kind of, I think we have the blueprint, and it's not a purposeful, but I think a great segue into your latest book, which is Real Love, which talk about a word that has stigma attached to it. You picked another really, really good one.
I did.
So, especially because like I have been in the Ram Dass camp, which is Bhakti yoga, which is all about love. It's a celebration of love. But I still to this day, given the right circumstances or context, will recoil at the word, be like, it's too mushy right there. Like that is not something I can get behind. And I think sometimes that's valid. Like this is not the right usage of maybe this word, but sometimes it's just, an inborn reaction to it. So what did you discover? I know you were writing this book for a while.
Hmm.
What did you discover along the way about people's relationship with the word, and then ultimately, what it means to you, and also from the Buddhist perspective too?
Well, it was an amazing journey. It's taken me a long time to write this book, and well, first of all, I teach so much loving kindness meditation,
Yeah.
and um, the term loving kindness is the common translation of this word from Pali, which is the language of the original Buddhist text, and that word is metta, metta.
Right.
And it's pretty well, virtually almost always, I think, translated as loving kindness, and that's fine. I certainly use the word, but my concern about loving kindness as a term is that it's sort of an odd term. You don't use it in casual conversation, and so
Right.
you know my concern is that that might make the quality itself seem somewhat arcane and removed from day-to-day life and precious, like in the negative sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
Although I was walking down the street in Brooklyn to go teach at this yoga center, and I got out of the car, and these two young women were coming toward me, and I heard them talking about loving kindness. So I thought, oh, I know where they're going, and they didn't. They walked right by the yoga center, and they never came back. So I thought, oh, this is like the hippest block in Brooklyn. Everyone's talking about loving kindness. And I've had scholars and translators say to me, well, don't say loving kindness, just say love.
Mm,
Loving kindness is kind of cutesy. Just say love. That's what you mean.
sure.
But love is a very problematic term. We love everything from our yogurt to, our wallpaper to everything.
Yeah.
Or we think of love as this kind of sentimentality and being sort of gooey and ungrounded and unreal, um, and that's not, of course, at all what metta means. The literal translation of metta is friendship, but I have problems with that too because in my mind, friendship implies wanting to spend time together,
Mm.
and I think loving kindness actually doesn't. You might have a heart full of love and compassion for someone and realize I can't do it. It's not safe, or it's out
Right.
of balance, or not now, or it's time to say no, or who knows, all
Yes.
kinds of reasons. But that doesn't mean your heart is closed or shut down. There is such a thing as tough love. There is such a thing as fierce compassion, and so I sort of circled back to trying to use the word love, which
Mm.
was the birth of this book. Can we really explore what that word is and see a way where it isn't all completely entangled with like pop culture and song and and
Yeah.
yearning in those ways.
Yeah. Romantic love,
Yeah, yeah.
essentially. And I'm sure throughout the process, like, you realize that, I mean, it covers a spectrum. Like, you're talking about loving yogurt. Like, I probably use the word God knows how many times a day. And obviously when I'm talking about, the cucumber I just grew, I really do love it, but I also really love my son, and in a
Yeah,
qualitatively different way.
yeah,
Just a
yeah.
little bit. Maybe there's a thread there that's the same, of course, but it's such a broad kind of usage. And then how it gets picked up colloquially. I mean, it's like the word literal, which I'm very guilty of using. I say the word literally when I don't mean literally, because and so, like, love just has kind of been inserted into our everyday lexicon, which I don't think is a horrible thing by any means, but it's getting to the that maybe the energy. I'm trying to find the right word. Do you know if
Hmm.
in Buddhism there'd be a word that kind of communicates the initial energy, or the actual something behind it? Do you know what I'm talking about or trying to get at?
Not exactly, but I wouldn't know the word anyway. I'm researching too.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially trying to get to the root
Yeah.
of what this word can mean to people in a productive and practical way, because I think, like, what you're saying is sometimes the pragmatic and practical aspects of these things can get lost. And
Yeah.
I think they do have a function in our lives, and arguably one of the most important ones. So yeah, I mean, like, what are some of the stories, not necessarily from the book, but they can be from the book, but of people's, reactions to the word love?
Well, I mean, I tend to define it as connection,
Mm, mm, mm.
like a profound sense of connection, which doesn't mean you like somebody. and it doesn't mean you're going to take them home with you, but you really deeply know that your lives have something to do with one another, and
Mm.
it isn't necessarily emotional, which hangs people up a lot, because we tend to identify love with this sort of surging, sweeping, warmth that like transports us, and if that's not what we feel, we think it's not love. But
Mm.
um, you know, the whole thesis is that well, first of all, the book evolved out of this one line in a movie. The movie was Dan in Real Life. It's about 10 years old now,
Yeah,
and
I know it. Yeah.
yeah. So one of the characters says, "Love is not a feeling; it's an ability."
Mm.
Love is not a feeling; it's an ability, and which really resonated with me. It really paralleled some of the kind of meditative experiences I'd had
Mm.
doing intensive loving kindness practice, where I realized that when I thought of love as a feeling, and of course it is also a feeling, but
Right.
when I thought of it, primarily as a feeling or only as a feeling, then it became like a commodity in my mind, and I
Right.
realized it was like a package, and it was a package in someone else's hands that someone could give me love, or they could take it away from me. And if they
Mhm.
took it away from me, then I'd be completely bereft, like there'd be no love in my life at all. But and it was almost like seeing the UPS delivery person sitting at my doorstep, taking a glance down at the address and saying, "Nah, never mind, going somewhere else." And they walk off into the distance, and I go, "Wait a minute, that leaves me with nothing."
Right.
And in contrast, to see it as an ability reminds us that it's within us, it's ours. And other people may awaken it or enliven it or threaten it, but it's ours.
Right. It's innate. Right.
That's right. It's part of us. It's a capacity. It's an ability, which also means it can be helped to flower and grow, which
Yes.
is another controversy. But
Why is that a controversy?
I think I'm often puzzled over that. I think maybe sometimes I think in the West we tend to believe that something like love or compassion is like a gift, and you either have it or you don't. And if you don't, you're like out of luck, or it sounds too cold.
Yeah.
I'm going to train in love, but uh, from the Eastern point of view, or certainly the Buddhist point of view, it's absolutely trainable because that quality of connection, that quality of caring is born from how we pay attention. If you're talking to somebody and you're not really listening and you're completely scattered and you don't take them in, you don't feel very connected. And
Mm.
the answer is not to force yourself to care. The answer is to pay attention.
Right.
So as you switch the way you're paying attention, the care will come naturally. It'll come automatically.
Right. The question is when we're talking about, I guess, love, when we also look at it through our own experiences, right? Here's another kind of like link between your book with Robert Thurman, Love Your Enemies, and Real Love is loving through difficult experiences in our own lives, either with other people or even if we throw it out into the ever fun and happy world of politics. How do we maintain this, or not maintain, but access our innate love? Right? Like, how do we do that? And I love what you're saying, that this isn't something that someone gives us or takes away from us. This is something that's available to us. And it's also not just a feeling or an emotion. So we can maintain a loving perspective, even if we vehemently disagree with someone that we are maintaining that perspective to. So how do we get into this? There's two questions in here. One is, as we're personally and intrapersonally going through difficult experiences, what are some things we do to stay in touch with that innate love? And then the second question is, we can get to afterwards, which is, the shifting cultural landscape and how to maintain some level of equanimity and love through that as well. Because I know that's throwing a ton of people off too. But let's start with intrapersonal love through difficult experiences.
Well, I mean, it's a lot depends on how we pay attention, and this is a training. For me, the answer for everybody is not my answer, but my answer would be, I access it through meditation and having a regular meditative practice, and not just when things are hard, but when things are ordinary and things are boring and things are kind of just going along, because it's almost like muscle strength, that's like strength training. So then when things are really hard, you have some resource, you've built that, from just a mere capacity to something that can help sustain you.
Right.
Just, and that doesn't mean you don't feel bad or you don't even feel awful, but
Right.
like you
Right.
remember what you really care about. You remember what's most important for you. Remember, actions have consequences. So maybe there's some feelings you want to have pass through you without sending that email,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever it is. We have a lot of choice. We have a lot of power in those things, when we're aware. And so, it's learning how to pay attention differently. And then we take that into the difficult times.
So let me ask you this, because I am probably up there with the worst offenders in terms of following through with a regular meditation practice. I think every February I'm great at
Yeah.
it because there's your meditation challenge, which
Uh-huh.
works. But then inevitably, and they're for totally different reasons, whenever it happens, I get knocked off. And then it's just like you're saying, it's muscle training. It's like if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't exercised in a while and you try to go do it, it's just like, oh my God, this is, how do people do this ever? And that's somehow how I get with meditation. And so I've tried a lot of different things, like redefining how redefining meditation, finding different ways that can get me in a state where I'm recognizing awareness. But I'm sure you get this a lot. And I know actually going to a place and meditating with a teacher who is skilled in this. What do you recommend? What's the the jump start for getting back into a meditation practice or starting one if you've been knocked off a few times? What do you recommend for people? I'm sure you've gotten this question before.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody gets knocked off.
Mm.
I mean that's like the rhythm of life.
Right.
It's why in actual teaching of meditative technique, the thing I tend to emphasize the most, far more than anything, is learning how to begin again
Right.
gracefully. Like, let's say you're trying to be with the breath, and which was the first instruction I ever got in India. Sit down and feel your breath, and I thought, how hard can this be? And I was like, whoa, this is
Right.
not so easy. It wasn't like 800 breaths or 900 breaths before my mind wandered. It was one, or
Right.
two, and then I'd be
Right.
gone. And I heard over and over again that the most important point happens after you've been distracted, where you need to practice letting go. You need to
Right.
practice starting over and beginning again and not being so demoralized or self-hating or whatever it is, which takes up a lot of
Right.
um, let go and start over. And that's the real teaching in there. So you're almost like you're practicing resilience right in that. And I just found that the most important life skill, which is why I say it ad nauseum, because
Right.
I just never have found anything in my venerable old age where, at this point where we don't have to start over and over and over and over. We
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really true. It's the best. I mean, that is the skill, I guess, and it is that ability of getting in, not even in the necessary right mind state, but the idea of accepting that the challenge is the opportunity,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
ability that when, like, inevitably what happens to me if I try to sit down, take a few breaths amidst the chaos that might be happening, monkey mind jumps in. It's like, you think you have time for this? No way. And I know the Gandhi saying, if you don't have 10 minutes to meditate, you need to meditate for like 20, or it's an hour,
That's
or
right.
whatever it
That's
is. Yeah.
right. That's right. Yeah.
It's true, but yet I'm very good, very, very good at convincing myself of things that aren't necessarily for the benefit of me or, my own
Uh-huh.
self-care. Um, but it's great to hear it, from you, especially that really is the skill there. That is the
Yeah.
skill. So how do those two things interface? How do we get, the love, and the awareness that can come through meditation? Where's kind of the nexus point that we should be tuning into through your experiences? I mean, one of the beautiful things is you have meditated for a
Mm-hmm.
really long time, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. That it's so. I also just know people who do these. I can see it. My friends and people I've spoken to do the 10-day retreats, the Vipassana retreats. There is a clarity that comes from the people immediately following, and usually it follows through far after. That really, I know a lot of people experiment with a lot of different modalities, but that is one of the most replicable, clear thinking about things that I've seen. So what have your experiences kind of led you as to the connection between this love and awareness that we experience?
Well, I can see it, like the example that, we've been using of, say, trying to settle your attention on the feeling of the breath, only to discover you're far, far away. and you need to let go and come back. The real ingredient in that, whether it's ever named or not, is self-compassion. Because if your tendency is to realize, oh, it's been quite some time since I last felt a breath, and then just go on a rant against yourself, that is endless and it's mean-spirited, and you're so despairing, and it feels so horrible. And when we all do that, and when we emerge from that, not only have we added sometimes a considerable length to the distraction, it's like maybe the distraction lasted 30 seconds and this lasts 3 hours, but we leave that space feeling so bad, and we're so exhausted, and we feel so demoralized, and we don't have a sense of the wherewithal within us to go on and just continue or do better or whatever it is, because it holds to anything we're trying to do in our life. We're always having to start again. And so it's right there in the technique. That's where we're learning it.
Right. And I mean, I remember I'm always struck by the quote where someone asked, I think I heard you say this, where they asked the Dalai Lama, what about self-hatred? And he's like, what? He's like, what? What does that mean? We don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And that is, it obviously is, I mean, if you're fortunate enough to not have any reflected back negativity at yourself, awesome. But I'm sure even if you're one of those people, you can see people do have a problem with that. Just look at their actions of how they treat other people. That's coming from inside. That's not just like a spontaneous response. So it really is incredible how we don't really even, I mean, that's why the secret, I guess, if there is a secret in the meditative, like cultivating awareness practices, is that once you can recognize and see these things, you have the ability to potentially at least accommodate and interact and potentially transmute or even get to the functionality of these things rather than just, being stuck in these patterns.
Right.
Speaking of patterns, how do you personally engage with politics in this day and age? I'm curious because I know you're on Twitter. Do you follow this?
I'm on Twitter.
Do you follow it on Twitter? Like, what is your day-to-day experience of what's going on, if it is a day-to-day experience?
It is a day-to-day experience. I have actually not watched television news since before the election.
Same. Good for you.
And thank you. Good for you too. I do follow it on Twitter. A lot of whom I follow are journalists or political commentators, because I am a very political person in a lot of ways. And I have really appreciated things I've seen in New York, like movements that say, turn your anger into action. Because one of the things I've been passionate about for a very, very long time is voting. And I really have urged people to vote. I've written things asking people to vote. I've noticed, the comments I get back when these things are posted are not always very kind, but it seems to me that it's very close to a kind of Dharma understanding of it's like if everyone has innate dignity and everyone has the right to vote, no one should take that voice away from us. And it's saying I am worth something when we do that vote. And I think it's just really important. And so it's not that I've abandoned my interest, in the political process. I just think that's what I'm most passionate about. That's where I should turn my energy. I hear a lot of what else is going on, but I find it awful and it's scary. It's like, I mean, I was raised Jewish, and maybe it would be this way anyway. And I hope it would be this way anyway. The sight of swastikas I don't find very thrilling.
Even in the Hindu context, they're still off-putting for people who grew up where they didn't really mean that. So
it's scary.
It is scary. I mean, I guess I see this crazy. My dad just pointed out, he's staying with me today. He just pointed out that this eclipse just cut the country in half. Which he viewed as very symbolic, even though it's not the literal half of who voted for who. And then in 7 years, we also have another one that cuts the country in half on another diagonal. And it is kind of symbolic of how this country feels right now, whether it really is that way or not. And I also kind of bounce this idea of what you were talking about, this dignity
Yeah.
that we are able to express through voting, but also through making our individual choices, both
Yeah.
personally and communally and collectively, to kind of create the world we want to live in, and trying to find that line between being aware of what's going on, but also being like, I don't want to get so caught up where I'm walking around, which does the reason we were saying, giving us doffs of the cap for the political news stuff is you see people who get really sucked in can get a very rigid perspective and take on all of these things on both sides. And I don't mean to do the Donald Trump on many sides. I'm not talking about Nazis. I'm talking about left-right political ideologies. But you see it happens, and I don't find it doesn't make me cynical, but it obviously is a bit unsettling to see the state of divisiveness. So how do you when you're seeing this and you're aware of what's going on, like what if someone's listening and let's say they're the type of person, I'm luckily one who's not. I have too many actual problems in my real life to worry about the political problems in terms of getting too caught up in them. That's my take. But let's say someone is really riled up about this stuff. What advice could you give to them for mindfully engaging either their own reactions or just objectively what's going on out there?
I think it's do something. First of all, what's interesting is that the Buddha taught loving kindness as the antidote to fear. So I just said about 4 times it's scary.
Yeah.
And part of my effort to redeem words in a way is with the word love is I would like love to be part of the conversation and not just be seen as giving in or being sentimental or being kind of stupid,
Right.
Can we take strong action but born out of love and not hatred is our quandary and hopefully our exploration. And
right.
So I think cultivating a real state of love is part of it. I think taking action, it's not just, I know there was a lot of conversation and not wrong conversation after the election about having conversations with people who have different points of view, but I think that's just one element, because I think I could have a conversation with somebody forever and I don't believe, actually, I'm not a moral relativist. I think there's right and wrong.
Yes.
And, the things that cause suffering and the things that not, and I can talk to somebody, till we're both blue in the face and they're not going to convince me of, it being correct to, have kids go hungry in this country or something like that.
Right.
I think it's just wrong. And so, and I'm sure there are things that, I think and believe that they find just as distorted. So I think that's not the only thing. I think we have to take what moves us and put it into action, even if it's just like a small act of good-heartedness that feels like so insufficient. Like
right.
It's not nearly approaching the magnitude of the problem. It's like we have to do something.
Right.
It doesn't have to be overtly political. It could be artistic. It could be feeding somebody. It could be, wrapping sandwiches for Meals on Wheels, as long as it still exists. And, but really get engaged. And you said it also just a few minutes ago, collectively. There's something very interesting about a sense of community.
Yeah.
In times of great division. It doesn't have to be like a rigid, we're right and you're wrong kind of community, spending our time doing that. But it's not easy to confront one's own fears, and it's not easy to go forward. And to do that sort of together is a lot nicer than doing it all alone.
Yeah. And it makes me think of it in my own life. I have a lot of different social groups, right? I know a lot of different people from a lot of different likes, as I'm sure you do, and a lot of people do. And especially in your function as a teacher, if people are interested generally in meditation and things you speak about, you meet a lot of different people and you realize that not everyone's perspective is going to be your own. It's impossible, right? That's a given. But you also realize that people are shaped by many different things in the world. And then when you start to realize there's many different perspectives, there's many different people, you see that none of their opposing perspectives denies or takes away any of their innate humanity, any of the qualities that make them a person, and the divisions and opinions and things we have, even if, like, I agree with you, there's right and wrong, and I might starkly disagree with someone, and maybe my earnest hope is that they'll change their mind, but it doesn't mean we have to be enemies of each other. We have to set up these boundaries. And I see a lot of boundaries getting set up, right? And I see a lot of, snark, subtle things moving in, pejorative things that they're really not going to serve any function for what's going on out there culturally or collectively or even individually. It doesn't make us happier people to be constantly deriding other people. So I love that you say like this anecdote of doing a small thing. And I also doubly love that it can be artistic and creative too, because I feel like that gives us two different things. It gives us an outlet for that energy, which if we don't get, can get really not good in a lot of ways. And we take that step, that doing something step that is just seems really important. It's like if you're meditating and you have some very important insight that you feel can help you or someone else. If you just didn't do anything about it, is it worth as much as if you actually acted on it and it made things better out here in the world? I don't know. That's a philosophical question, but I think the answer is yes, you should do it. You should take action on the thing that comes up from there. That's maybe why you're having it. So
yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So, okay. I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to talk a little bit about Goenka because I'm sure, I don't know if you know this, but I really like reading, and I like, also finding quotes from people who I resonate with, and Goenka is someone who, whenever I come across, it's always in the meditation vein, typically, but the clarity of the words that have been recorded are just incredible, just absolutely cut through everything incredible. So I would wonder if you could just share a story or two about him and just kind of his influence on mindfulness. Now is a buzzword. You know that. Loving kindness, buzzword. All these things are buzzwords. But this is a guy who really kind of proliferated, the genesis of this, at least in the West. I don't know if everyone is super familiar with him, but we're talking about S.N. Goenka. And I would just love to hear something about him from you.
Sure. Well, he was actually my first teacher. I went to India. It was almost like my junior year abroad. It was part of this college program, like an independent study program, and I created a project saying I wanted to go to India and study Buddhist meditation, and they accepted it. Nice. So that was my year's assignment. So, but I was looking for something very practical, very direct, very how-to. I wasn't really interested in a tremendous amount of scholarship or philosophy or whatever. I really wanted to know how to do the thing.
Yeah.
And so and it wasn't like now. I was going to school in Buffalo, like I said, and I looked around and maybe there were a few places to learn, but I had no idea where they were or anything.
Right.
So I went to India, and when I found him, I knew it was absolutely perfect. The first, he taught in the context of these intensive 10-day retreats. They weren't like in my day, they weren't completely silent, and they weren't quite so strict, but still, they were, they were very intensive. Yeah. And the first night of my first retreat, Goenka said, the Buddha did not teach Buddhism, the Buddha taught a way of life. And this is in no way about becoming a Buddhist, and you don't have to reject anything else. And, he had a lot of Hindu students, he had some Muslim students, and it being Indian, he had a whole bunch of new Western students. So this was really my foundation, and I've never veered from that. So sometimes people ask me about secular mindfulness, and I say, well, from my experience, mindfulness, my own personal experience, I've always used it in a secular way,
Yeah.
Because he was my first teacher, and he set the stage. So Goenka was part of an Indian family with strong ties to Burma, and he had maybe grown up in Burma, and certainly he was living in Burma at the time, and had a Burmese passport. And Burma was, under a military dictatorship at the time. It was very difficult. When I was first in India, really at first, you could only go to Burma for 24 hours. And then after a little while, maybe a year, you could go for 7 days only.
Oh, wow.
So his mother was living in India, and she became ill, so he had to get whatever kind of permission he needed in order to leave Burma, and he did. And he was with his mother in India, and she recovered, and so he was there. He taught a 10-day retreat down near Bombay somewhere, where I guess she was living, and then he taught maybe another one, and then he came up to Bodh Gaya, and so I sat what was maybe his third or fourth retreat ever,
Oh, wow. Wow.
maybe fourth, because at that retreat, that was the place where I met Joseph Goldstein, Ram Das, Krishna Das, um, Ramesh.
Right.
There were a number of people nearby. Well, I met nearby in Delhi on the way there. Um, who were at my first retreat, who were really like lifelong friends.
Right.
Danny Goldman brought me there. He's the one who told me about the retreat. So,
Right.
and because it wasn't, fully silent, maybe we did form a very strong bond, all of us. So they had, most of them, I think, had already done one or two retreats when I showed up. So maybe this was the fourth. And Goenka stayed on and taught several more 10-day retreats, and then left. So it was really an amazing moment in time, just being there together.
Yeah. I'm always blown away by certain teachers who, in recent history, and not even some a little farther back, who just still have the kind of cultural impact, whether people realize it or not. It's just astounding. And we've spoken about it before a little bit, but I do think lineage is important with anything. I just think knowing where things come from in general gives you some insight into what those things might be. Call me crazy, but that's just generally what I think. And so knowing that these things stem back, I mean, we're also in a climate now, like where who's not a teacher, right? I'm sure you must think this all the time. Like, who's not a meditation teacher? Who's not a yoga teacher? Who's not a new age teacher? Who's not a whatever it is? And having some ground, and it's not to say those people aren't teachers in their own way, but having some groundedness and tradition in a supportive sense is, I think, typically what I look for with this stuff. So I always love hearing about that. So we'll wrap it up in a second, but I realized, I think the last time I had you on, it was early on, and I wasn't asking questions at the end of episodes. So I asked 3 short questions and then 1 longer question at the end. So here are the questions, and answer however feels appropriate. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
What's your favorite number?
16.
What's your favorite animal?
Dog.
Cool. And here is one that you will enjoy. What's a practical tip that has helped you in your life that you could share with listeners?
Well, this goes back to another teacher of mine, and meditation practice, and this teacher named Manindra, who I also studied with very early on. And there I was living in India, and even though I wasn't always on retreat, life was very simple. There were no cell phones then. There were no computers. It was like no one had a job. And still I found it very difficult to have a daily meditation practice. And I had a certain kind of pattern, like when I sat and it felt good. I think, oh, great, I'm going to live in India for the rest of my life feeling exactly this way. And then when I sat and it didn't feel that good, I'd get up, or I'd think, oh, it doesn't work except on retreat, or I can't do it, or something like that. And I went to Manindra with this pattern and described it. And he said, for you, I have one piece of advice, and that is just put your body there. He said, every day you put your body there. Some days it'll feel one way, other days it'll feel another way. It's like you've just got to do it. And, it doesn't have to be for endless hours each day. But I realize I'm also the kind of person that benefits from structure. And I'm the kind of person who benefits from the everydayness of it. Like, if I said to myself, okay, you're going to practice 3 times a week, it wouldn't work, because it'd be Monday, and I think, well, I'll start on Wednesday. Or, it'd be Wednesday, and I'll think, I'll do it 3 times on Saturday. It's like, if it's every day, it's every day. And if it's for 2 minutes, it's for 2 minutes. That's what the reality is, but it's every day. Right. I completely relate to benefiting from structure, even though I'll resist it for a pretty decent amount of the time. Sharon, thank you so much for coming on again. And it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Well, thank you so much.
Cool. I'll clip it there. I was talking to Lily a little bit. We're going to have a call about stuff, but if there's any way I can help with anything, even with Mayan Pod Network, if you have something you want to go out about the book or anything we can do to help, we're happy.
That's great. Yeah, I'm still sort of in book promotion mode.
Yeah, that's
so
what I
I'd love
figured.
anything, and
Cool.
maybe we'll think of who that other person was, or you'll have me on again, and we'll just talk about love or something.
Yeah, I know there's a few other people who expressed interest. We're doing this big event the 21st. I'm gonna meet a lot of different people who I think are doing different things in this space. I don't know what their prerogatives or intentions are, but I know a lot of them really seem like great people. And if there's any connections that can be fostered there, of course, I will
That's so
make
great.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Totally.
send me your schedule. I'd love to see you sometime.
Yes.
I can't think off the top of my head where I am when, but
I will. Let's definitely find a time to get together for sure.
Great. Okay,
Cool.
dear. Take
All
care.
Right. Thanks, Sharon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening past the music. A reminder, I'm going to have an EP coming out sometime in the fall, probably not September, think in October. I'll have details on that. I know a lot of you have been asking on YouTube and other places where to get the music. I'm going to have a place where you can get it. As a reminder, you don't have to do it, but on Patreon, if you like any of the music you hear on any of these shows, you can sign up at the level, I think it's $9 a month, where you get access to any music you hear on this show. And I'm going to be really ramping up what I'm doing on Patreon in the coming months. I finally have some time and space to do that. So I really appreciate it. Big shout out to Patrick Nemchik, who is just continues to be the coolest. What else we got going on? That's it. I love you. Thank you. I will see you next